I'm trying very hard.
It was fine. Megan, years back.
It's hard.
Oh, no, today's Thursday.
It's Thursday. Is that something you might consider? Here's what's in for that. In a year or two, they're gonna go back to
It might be better to wait.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty solid. At that point, there was a question as to the direction going.
Gotcha.
Okay, trust my first go around.
I think that was probably a basis for that.
Okay, gotcha. It's grown tremendously.
It might, no, I know, yeah, and it might be better to wait until they're.
Okay, gotcha.
Because it's gonna be within the next year, couple
I
of
think
years.
so. I don't know the exact
I think it's gonna be, I don't think it's gonna be that much.
demoed inside. Everything's demoed
Well, once they
inside.
do that.
Right, that's true, that's true. Well, when it comes to materials, it's always an issue, right? So
Getting.
Yeah, oh, of course, I don't feel clear.
See?
yes, yep. So that conversation, just tell them.
No, I was here to rush off that new
Probably best to wait maybe another two.
Oh, just like a Big Mac burger.
That's right.
My answer is
It'll be a scientific experiment which goes bad first. This is a Big Mac. Exactly.
I can't remember the list of the meeting topics. Is there one that?
This one you mentioned.
Where like.
I didn't find time. I pretty much don't find time for someone to start talking. And I said, I have to do this. And I didn't even find time.
I don't know my meeting.
Would that fall under a certain topic?
Typically, we fall into a general topic of,
Yes.
you know, if we were talking about.
Approval for something?
So I know that,
Just to get
That's
your
smart.
feedback.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
smart.
thought that.
That's the right,
Yeah, I said, we need to bring it to Steve. So, yeah.
yeah.
Makerspace. Everybody ready? It's 7:02 PM and I will call the meeting to order. If we can stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Today is January 11th, and this is the second budget workshop for the Milford Board of Education. I'll do a roll call. Megan Doyle. Here. Scott Ferminder.
Present.
Tracy Irby.
Here.
Tom Kova.
Here.
Lauren Mahler.
Here.
Una Petrosky.
Here.
Christina Preet. Here. Mike Smith.
Here.
Cindy Wolf-Boynton.
Here.
Susan Glennon is here. 10 present. Thank you so much. We move on to the discussion of the superintendent's proposed 24-25 budget. We're picking up at, we left off at 6,000, but we have one facilities question left from yesterday. So that's where we're starting.
Yes, we're jumping right in. Go, John.
Good. Okay, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Kyle, Ms. Glenn, members of the board. Thank you once again for submitting your questions. They're very thoughtful, and we appreciate the opportunity to explain the budget a little more. So let me just go through a little bit of the structure of how we organized tonight's questions. Like Ms. Glenn had mentioned, that we have 23 there. That needs to be answered first, so that's the 23 right up at the top. And then we did answer 24 and 25 last night, so then it just continues on to 26. And the next couple pages are just a carryover from last night's packet. So those are in the exact same order under the exact series that they were the other day. When you get to question 35, that's where new questions were coming in. So these are new questions that were not in last night's packet. So the way that we structured and organized this was, once again, in a similar fashion by organizing it by series or by general executive summary. So as you see, question 35 and 36 are ones that pertain to the general executive summary category. And then from there, we group them by the series once again. So that's the general structure of the overview, and then the buildings and ground projects are attached to it.
Great, thank you.
So question number 23. I am happy to see a greater investment in the 24-25 request for buildings and grounds, accounts 4304 and 4305. Please provide some examples of projects that were requested but were not included in the budget request. So I want to take a moment to kind of explain how these are organized in the back and these building and ground projects. So you'll have two groupings here. One is the building projects, which is the 4304, and then you'll have the building grounds, which is the 4305, and they're grouped accordingly. Within each grouping, we took the liberty to highlight the one or two in blue that are the ones that are approved the ones that are proposed in the budget currently. The other ones are ones that Mr. Bradbury and his team and the principals have discussed as other additional needs, but those are not ones that are currently up for proposal right now. And those are ones that we are, continuing on a cycle over time. So if you take a look at that, there is the totals. That's sum per school. We broke it down by school for you so you could see what each school has there. And there's a total by school, and then a total at the end of that grouping, at the end of 4304, as a total proposed in the budget, and also a total if you summed up all those projects together, what that total would be. And it's very similar for the grounds project as well, exact same structure. And at this time, I'm happy to take any questions you may have on buildings or grounds projects.
Thank you. I have a question, Mike. My recollection from past years is that, it is prioritized, so these are prioritized.
These are, yes.
Questions from board members? Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. I'm just briefly looking at this list, and I'm laughing but not laughing at section 2 and on Meadowside, add hot water into the art room. It really just demonstrates how old our buildings are and that we're doing the best we can and really need to invest and continue to invest, because the idea that we don't have hot water in a classroom, in an art room, is just kind of innate, in my opinion.
Yes. So we, the buildings are old and aging, and we do our best to keep and maintain them, but you are correct, Ms. Doyle, there's still things that we are trying to tackle and catch up on, and this is one of those things, and I agree completely.
Overall, I'm happy to see that we're putting more money into this account, and think over time that there isn't any extra overage in the other accounts, and especially with the zero-based budgeting. I like seeing it with the projects kind of outlined as well. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, building on that, I really appreciate you guys compiling this. It's really helpful to understand the scope of the needs and the wants and the needs and the wish list versus like what you're actually putting forward. And the one question I have looking at this is on the first page of the building projects. We'd love to kind of hear more about, on the ORA, Orange Ave, I believe, the one that's below the blue is replacing the smoke detectors. And just curious if that's assuming they're not end of life yet and you're replacing them on a replacement schedule, just,
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
they still work,
They
that's what
still
you're
work,
wondering.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good place to start, yeah.
Yes, and they are inspected regularly.
Yeah.
Cool.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, if that was an item of life safety, then that would obviously jump to a top priority. And if it was an immediate need, it
would
wouldn't
just
even
do
be
it.
something that we would list here. We would just get it done into this year's budget, which could actually cause a deficit in one of those accounts. It's one of those things that we've talked about throughout the year.
And that happens.
And that
Yeah.
happens.
Thank
Every
you.
year, something, oh, it's not
Unexpected,
working
this
anymore,
doesn't
and
work, and
that's a priority, so.
Right.
And that becomes an immediate priority.
And
Yes,
that's what I assumed, but I didn't want to do that, so I appreciate that answer.
Absolutely. And Mr. Bradbury and his team do a great job at preventative maintenance.
Mhm.
So they do life cycles for all these items, and they have software that helps track that. So it's not just so much of a guessing game, but even with the software, there's still an element of lifespan for any item you have. But there's software that tracks that, and as they go through, when they feel like something's coming to the end of its life, that's when they replace it.
Thank you so much.
Can you talk a little bit about how you balance the needs at each, between the buildings? So, there's some schools this year are getting more work done than other schools. I mean, obviously Pumpkin Delight's getting a whole new addition,
Absolutely, yes.
but, in looking at this, one might wonder why is one school getting so much and another school isn't? I know sometimes it might be another year, the other school might
Yes,
get.
and that's exactly it, that's a great question, and it really it's based on the needs of that school at that moment in time. So, right now, and in previous years, there may be one school that received much more attention, and then that school may be okay for the next couple of years in terms of like bigger, larger projects. And we have them on that cycle, and the buildings are aging, they are a different number of years old, so each one has different things that need to be completed at a certain time. And the variable in it as well is the different, let's take two identical schools built at identical times with the same material. One may deteriorate faster or have more damage, so that would cause it to go up on the same.
Okay, all right, thank you. Ms. Petrowski?
Can you talk a little bit about who actually makes the prioritization? And the reason I ask is because on JFK and the grounds projects, I see that a priority 1 was to replace the sidewalk in the back of the building, but the priority 2 is what we've chosen to put in the budget. So I'm not sure what that means and how indicative is that just 1, 2, 3 in a list? Or is it high,
Yes.
they were both high priority and we just selected one over the other?
They're both high priority. I would say that when you look at that one in general, yes, to answer your first question, who selects the priority on the list? So Mr. Bradbury and the building principals work collaboratively to talk about,
Bless
to
you.
talk about, like we talked about before, the needs of the building, right? What are the current needs of the building? So there's a collaborative discussion that happens, and then through that process, they identify what that ranking order is.
Okay.
And this ranking order may change over year to year. So, for instance, one that has 8 items on it, like a Live Oaks building project, the one that's listed 6 or 7, if something comes up that Mr. Bradbury feels is more of an immediate need, that might jump up to a 1 in the next year's cycle.
Okay.
I think when you look at these 2 items here, the reason that I think that he might have highlighted that second priority is because that was more of a need that's jumping out now, and the parking lot has it's like an absorbent type material that like allows the water to drain through it, and because of that, it washes away some pieces of it, so I would imagine that he wants to put that up at a higher priority because of just more of the immediate need of it.
Okay, that's helpful, that it's a ranking.
Yes.
I'm gonna guess that the replacing of the sidewalk isn't really $10.
I think
$10
it's
per
$25.
$2,500?
So I think it's,
I'm guessing.
Oh, $10 per foot maybe,
I
or
would,
whatever?
I think that's $10 per foot, and he has 2,500 feet.
Do you
Yeah.
have a question?
No, it was also about the rankings
Oh,
too,
okay.
and assuming there's a safety concern and all of that goes in there, but that ranking makes sense to me.
Yes.
Other questions on this? Mr. Koba?
This is just for background, being new here. The abatement work, did I understand correctly, this is like continuance or completion of the abatement project that's been ongoing?
It's a great question, and there actually is a more in-depth answer that we have coming up in the actual questions for you.
Okay.
But just to answer it quickly for you, This does not complete
Okay, but you
abatement
still
of
have-
all schools. We
okay.
still have a number of areas in the school, and I can get into that a little more.
Okay.
Unless you'd like me to
No, I can,
jump to, okay.
I can wait, that's fine.
Sorry for a second.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Mr. Smith.
thank you. The only question, I guess, on the foreign high one, it looks like none of the requests for the building, for the grounds ones are highlighted. Does that mean foreign isn't getting it, or just that it's?
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. So in this upcoming budget cycle, there's no proposed budget request for that building. And like we had mentioned earlier, that may have been that foreign had received more work at a previous time.
Cool, thank you.
Ms. Preet?
Okay, I have a few. What does like, CPM and LOS, what entails the renovation of the teacher's room for 75 each? What would that mean?
Can you tell me what page you're looking
Buildings projects, Cockpen Meadow,
at? Okay.
and what was the other one?
And LOS,
What
so they're both 75, the last item on each.
So I will
Yes.
preface
Ah,
that,
thank you.
because they didn't become priorities,
Okay,
we didn't do deep dives into every
Okay.
single, so please know that if there's a question on every line, we may not have an answer, because they just didn't rise to priority.
Okay.
So the remodeling of teacher's room, you can imagine what that looks like just making a more appropriate space for teachers to have opportunities to run copies, have a work center, eat their lunch, have an opportunity to meet together. I don't know if you need anything more than that.
okay.
Sometimes the ceiling tile removal, floor replacement, painting.
Okay. And then, what is a foreign high school,
Buildings and grounds.
buildings, add backup chiller, what is that? 750,000.
So add backup chiller. So the chiller is what keeps that school under climate control, and that is a very important item that we have in that school because of the way that the building was built.
Mhm.
If that chiller goes down, the floors within a very short amount of time become wet and moist, and it becomes a safety issue.
Okay, gotcha.
So that chiller keeps the climate of the building under control. So having a backup one, if it goes down, is a necessity.
And that has gone down,
It has gone down.
not in the last couple of years, but
No,
in
Parts,
fact,
is it parts or it's been replaced or parts have been replaced? I remember when that,
been replaced, parts of it have been replaced. I don't, I mean,
we
the
had a part
buildings,
program this year.
yeah, I'm trying to think like over the number of years, I know that they've replaced parts, and I think they did replace a large part of it, if not the whole thing, in a number of years ago.
So let's talk about the chiller for a minute, because that is like a big honking number, right?
wouldn't that be on the CIP?
We can,
can.
but then there are priorities there too, right?
Correct,
So
yeah.
it just bumps up against priorities. So this is like one of those things we really should have, because if the chiller goes down, I think last conversation we had, it's likely foreign parts or parts that will take some time to get here.
Yes.
And we can't keep foreign open because it's dangerous. So that could cause closure of foreign for a couple of days. So this is one of those difficult, it's running, it's working, but it's $750,000 as a backup. So I think we should keep in mind these documents, like I think, hold on to this document for the future, because when we get into future conversations about our facilities and the age and the stage and the future, like we need to think about the investment in just upkeeping some things versus other options. So that's a good question, Ms. Preet, and Ms. Glennon, that probably is something we should talk about on the CIP.
And Mr. Bradbury has these on the list as a placeholder as well too. So this might move to a CIP, but he has it in a list. So it's kind of like a running list for his recollection, and you can see the things progressing. So as that moves up, then we would work on possibly moving that over to the CIP.
Okay.
And then I have one last one, on the last page, is renovate mechanical rooms at foreign, 2 of them, total 1.5 million. Is that a safety issue? What happens if we push that off? So renovate mechanical rooms, is that something that, and I know it's not high priority, but,
Yeah, so the fact that it was listed as a 26 would indicate that Mr. Bradbury doesn't see that as an immediate need at this point right now. I think it's one of those cycle type items. The mechanical rooms have boilers, they have different types of, it could have like a sump pump, could have a number of different machines in there that are keeping the school running. So that would explain the cost of that.
Okay.
And also the size and the amount of parts that would have to get to that room
Okay.
cost a significant amount of money to try to maneuver those into that space. So that's what also adds to that cost as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from board members? Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. I'm gonna go back to the chiller. Would the chiller fall under the category of any of the grants offered by the state for school, health, like, you know?
The HVAC
HVAC
reimbursements?
Yes.
reimbursements?
We could look into that.
Yeah.
Just because it's HVAC and it's a safety hazard, and so we need it to work for both reasons, so people don't fall, but also so they're prepared and stuff.
So the requirement of the HVAC is it has to go through the regular process of town approvals. So we'd have to treat it like it's a building project, so we'd
Have to put it on the budget.
We'd have to have you approve it, then go to the Board of Aldermen, then go to a building committee, et cetera. So we'll look into whether it would qualify, and then we can bring that information back as to whether it's the desire of the board to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Can we add it to this?
Other questions? Okay, I see none, we can move on to the next.
All right, I'm happy to take us into the 6,000 series, resuming with question 26, which references page 29, accounts 6100 and 6110. And the question is, are these totals resulting from individual school requests? So in response to that, each school develops its instructional and non-instructional supply budgets, identifying the specific requests needed to meet the needs of students and staff in each building. This process also honors the collaborative nature of our work at MPS, and therefore involves not only our instructional supervisors working with building leadership to review supply accounts, but also to discuss the needs of each building. Accounts 6100 and 6110 is a combination of both, not only individual school requests, but also other district departments as well. And within page 29, there is a table that breaks out the school and department requests for each of those two accounts.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. One thing I know that Milford does differently than other districts is we pay for AP exams and other types of exams for our students as part of our Milford measures and other types of achievements. Is that in this category? Where are those generally located?
That would be, so that could include PSAT testing, AP testing, those types of things as well. We also do, as we mentioned last night, our proficiency world language testing is also something that is budgeted for as well.
Great, thank you. I think that's very important. I know that other districts require parents to pay for those AP exams, and that's expensive. And if you have a student who's high achieving, who takes multiple tests, it could be several $100s on top of other costs associated with raising children. So thank you.
To clarify that, I think, we don't pay the full, we don't pay the full.
I'd have to look to
It's,
see.
I think it's
Yeah.
a portion. Okay.
So we are not answering that just yet, because we're all looking at each other. We believe it's a portion, and I'm not sure it's this account. So the answer is yes, we do pay for a portion of AP, but we're gonna double check. I don't know that it's this line item, Ms. Doyle.
Got it.
So
Thank you.
we're just gonna look at our backup.
Okay, thanks.
But we do pay for the PSAT.
That's the school, the
Yes, that's in full.
Yes.
Hey, PSAT is in full.
Full
Yeah.
amount, yes.
I know 20 years ago that I never paid for AP exams, so I don't know if it changed in that time period, but I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
I think, which is the one, is it the SAT day, or is it PSAT?
SAT day. It's now
Which
in
is-
junior year, and it's a state.
Right,
Yep.
okay,
Yeah, I'm just gonna see if we can get an answer to the AP on the spot.
okay. Other questions on this from board members?
I apologize.
That's okay.
Question number 27, will the ARPA funding allocated to Board of Ed be exhausted? Yes, the ARP ESSER grant expires on September 30th, 2024.
Questions on that?
And that's encumbered and expended.
Right, correct, okay. So we're using all our money.
Yes.
All right, number 28.
So this refers to page G1, and it's referring to entitlement and competitive grants. And it says there are several lines that have non-finalized budgeted numbers. Can you discuss the difference between entitlement grants and competitive grants? Are there potential general fund budget impacts for non-finalized values? Entitlement grants provide funds to schools and districts based on a predetermined formula, which can be based on a variety of factors, including enrollment and socioeconomic status. Competitive grant applications are open to all districts and originate upon the release of a request for a proposal, or RFP, from an office located within the State Department of Education. Competitive grants require schools and districts to submit a formal application that's reviewed, scored, and funded based on the quality of the proposed program. Non-finalized values indicate that we have not received the final award letter from the state, and the grant is in the process, and we do not see any significant changes to those figures. Upon submission of a grant application, a program manager at the State Department reviews the application before it's passed to the fiscal office for approval of grant funds to be allocated to a district. This process can transpire over the duration of several weeks once the grant has been submitted as complete.
Questions? Okay, we can move on.
Great. Question 29, page A21, building projects abatement for 13 classrooms. How much abatement is left to do? There is still abatement that needs to be completed across the district, including instructional spaces. It is difficult to quantify how much is left to complete all abatement work across the district. When renovation or construction projects occur, there are times when structural analysis requires us to perform an abatement. Because of the age of our buildings, in most cases, we plan for abatement when conducting renovation or updating projects, such as in these 13 classroom floor replacements. Abatement is part of our continual process of facility maintenance.
Okay. Does it suffice it to say, I think I've heard this before too, that if there's ever a situation where like a tile is cracked or something like that, it's taken care of right away?
Yes, absolutely.
Is it usually the tiles that are,
The tiles, yes, it could also be fittings on pipes, the insulation on pipes, which could be in the ceilings or in the walls, which is what makes it hard to quantify.
Right,
So like
okay.
ceiling tiles, we could take a look at how much that is left to complete, but when you look at what could possibly be inside of a wall that has some kind of insulation on the pipe, there could be insulation on pipes in the ceilings that have it as well. Yeah, it would be hard to quantify the exact
thank
amount.
you. Any other questions from board members on this one? Mr. Smith?
And then when you need to do the abatement, I assume it's similar to what Mr. Bradbury talked about a few weeks ago, where there are the thresholds of when you go out to bid versus the contractor versus in-house kind of thing?
Yes.
Cool.
So is it safe to
Ms.
say
Muller?
that as we continue kind of feeding off some of the questions here, obviously our older buildings
Yes.
across our district, that this is just kind of the extra add-on piece? Every time we go to do something, maintain something, upkeep something, you never quite know what you're gonna find. And then we get this extra cost on top of it, plus this extra delay on top of it, and that's just what you get with the kinds of buildings of the age that we have right now.
Absolutely, which is one of the reasons why when, like Mr. Bradbury, if he's looking at doing a classroom floor, in that time, he would want to try to tackle the ceiling and the lights as well too, so that once you have it set up for a containment, you're addressing as much as you can in that moment, rather than going back and piecemealing that.
We're being as efficient as we can with the
Absolutely.
funny little problem we have here with
Yes.
our buildings, okay?
Anybody else?
Ms. Glennon, AP follow-up. So thanks to one of my colleagues, we have an excerpt from a letter to foreign parents last March. The full cost of an AP exam this year is $97 an exam. Milford subsidizes that cost for each family. This year, the cost will be $25 per exam. Parents are responsible for payment of the first 2 exams, resulting in a maximum outlay of $50 per AP student. If a student is taking 3 or more exams, the district will incur the cost of the additional exams. So it's very well subsidized.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giancarlo.
Any other questions? Okay, move on to the next.
Okay, so question 30, this is very similar to a couple of the questions from previous, but I'm going to read it into the, so page A21, with respect to the grounds and building projects, some are obviously more of a critical need than others. Abatement, ceiling work, for example. Can the list be prioritized from a need versus want standpoint? So the list has been prioritized on a scale per school based on the highest need to the lowest. This is impacted by many factors which are reviewed annually. Life safety projects take priority. Some of those factors include current initiatives or programs, age of facility and grounds, etc. All facility and ground projects are considered in the context of needs as related to district priorities.
Makes sense. Any questions? Thank you.
So
Number 31.
thank you. Question 31, page A3, number 15. Is it correct that the city received $9.6 million last year and the Board of Ed received $1.2 million reimbursement from the city? So these are 2 separate and distinct funding sources. The first is known as education cost sharing, which is given to the city to defray the cost of funding public education. The amount of $9,673,235 is an approximate amount that the city will receive in education cost sharing. The second is excess cost grant, and that's given to the city to assist in funding the shortfall in cost for special education students who exceed 4.5 times the average cost per student. MPS makes an annual reimbursement request to the city based on those students whose education costs exceed 4.5 times the per pupil cost to educate a student. Last year, the board requested $1,173,474 from the money the city received from the state for excess cost.
Any questions on that? That's a complicated, it's a complicated process. Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. So the excess cost grant, how much was given back to the city that we did not recover?
The-
I don't think we did. We asked for the full amount last year.
Yeah, I think we asked for the full amount. The
Okay.
1 million is
That's what I was
the
trying,
full
because
amount.
some years we get like a portion of it, some years we don't
Right.
get any of it back. There's just, it's really just,
That's correct. And given these current times with what we're experiencing with our students lately, that we are anticipating requesting that full amount.
okay, great. And then the second question is this $9.6 million approximately, wasn't there a reworking of the formulation of what cities would be receiving based on that?
Yes.
And which way are we
Hasn't
going?
completely gone into effect, and we would not win favorably in that change.
Okay, so
We
can
would be,
anticipate-
we would stand to lose money in the new formulations.
Okay, thank you.
So something to speak to legislators about.
And it's important to understand as well, because this is something that I misunderstood when I was early in my parenting years with students here, is that the money offsets what the city is providing to the school board for operating our schools. It's not on top of, so it's not like we're getting an additional, $9 million. That's in the city, on the city side, it's in the city coffers. And we do not get it back. There's no opportunity to get it at all. It's their money to offset what they've awarded us in our budget. Yes,
On
Ms.
the-
Muller?
Just to clarify the process on the excess cost grant, That goes to the city, we then request what we think we want from that, and then where does that decision lie about what we actually receive?
So it's actually a law that they have to give it to us. It's a formal request is made to the mayor, but
Right.
the money has to.
But it's a
come to us.
require, okay.
Yes, it's a requirement.
We have to
Fantastic.
justify that we are,
We have to
Do the
demonstrate
money
in our
based
accounts
on-
We have
that,
to
Yeah.
demonstrate that we do have that need.
Right. We ask with a really good explanation, and then we get it.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, question 32 asks, for play-based learning in pre-K and K, how many need to be completed or revised based on learnings? Currently, all pre-K and K classrooms have been provided with necessary furniture and resources for the play-based learning.
Any questions on that? I'm happy to see that we have gotten beyond that. That's something the board was hoping for a long time.
yeah, and if I could cite, Ms. Glennon, like, that was a really big investment
Mhm.
for the board to support for preschool and kindergarten. And I've recently heard some feedback that some parents are disappointed that there isn't a lot of new stuff for elementary in this proposed budget. But those are examples of, there were very large investments at the elementary level, like, I think we could amount to like $750,000 in those two grades, so,
Just for this,
just for pre-K,
Correct.
play,
right.
and furniture and
Because
resources.
there's also STEM labs, road language.
Right, so, I just wanna like asterisk that it doesn't have to be equal every year. And in some years, just like the buildings, like, that was a very big investment in our elementary schools. So I just wanna put that out there publicly. And just because there isn't a new highlighted, particularly in my presentation, doesn't mean there's anything in here for elementary in the $111 million budget. Like, there's a lot for elementary in the budget. It just may not be highlighted as this new initiative. So just wanted to underscore that, okay?
Thank you. Ms. Preet?
Just a statement, actually. When I was substituting in the kindergarten rooms, it is very structured. It is a time block set aside for intentional play. The kids, it's rotated what they can take as far as let's say a clothespin, a color, so not everybody's doing the same thing all the time. They have a play plan where they have to say what they're going to do based on the station they're going to. They have to work collaboratively. They have to, it is very, it's wonderful. I really did like the intentional play, as well as the furniture. The furniture was just something that, they would fight over the furniture. It's just a fun environment. It's really, just school just seems so fun, right? It's just
That's what it's meant to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Ms. Preet.
Any other questions, comments? Great, thank you.
Question 33. What is the breakdown of mandatory versus discretionary spending? Broadly speaking, what budget categories fall into each bucket? It is mandatory for students to attend school for a minimum of 180 days, but it is not, for example, mandatory that we provide certain athletic and extracurricular opportunities. As aligned to the board's mission, vision, commitment, and goals, we believe that all aspects of our programming and budgeting fall under the category of non-discretionary spending.
This is could be a big topic at times when we've had to, past years, consider budget reductions. And we've had a lot of conversation about this, like what really is part of the core programming, so. Athletics, a lot of people think that athletics are super important, so it's something that we have strongly supported. Ms. Doyle?
I don't really have a question, I have more of a comment on this, is that you just said the sports, and I just remember from last year, looking at the list of what it was, I don't remember numbers, I don't remember everything on the list. But the amount of value for costs that we can add with some of these programs is tremendous. Because I remember we had on the list the cutting the athletic programs, and it was like, okay, we can cut athletic programs, and we have to cut 10 other programs in addition to this. So if we look back at the idea of how much this budget is, it's hard to kind of say what is not mandatory and what's discretionary. And I mean, we just had a conversation literally seconds ago about making kindergarten fun again. So we have to keep our kids in school in high school, and with the way trends are going with male students especially, I think having opportunities like esports and athletics are huge, important drivers to maintaining our attrition in schools. So, that's it.
Ms. Muller?
But looking at this question and thinking about it, seeing the answer, and then it's triggering a slightly different version of the question as well, for now or for later, potentially. Given the conversations from last year around budget and all of that, when we talk about potential cuts, what gets moved, and you were alluding to the fact that it's something that the board deals with every year, like how do we handle that? My understanding is that there are certain categories that cannot be touched. There are certain categories like salaries, like contracts, like certain things like that, that are going to cost what they are going to cost, and therefore the available places in the budget from which to make any potential reductions down the road are limited. What is that separation?
Well, that's also negotiable, right? So we can't touch the salary line if you keep the same number of staff members. You could change the salary line if you remove all STEM teachers, additional health options at the high school, electives at the middle school. You don't technically have to offer preschool, not mandated, with the exception of students with disabilities. So it's not as clean as that, right? And I think discretionary starts to become a matter of opinion, personal opinion in some cases. So unless we strip this budget down to what we are legally minimally obligated to offer our schools, and I don't see any use in engaging in that conversation, because there's no way Milford Public Schools would just offer a stripped down version of education. So I don't know how to bucket that. This question was, we really struggled with this one. And I think we typed it and erased it and typed it and erased it 5 times, the answer. Because there isn't an easy way to answer that. I'm not sure. I think mandatory for me would be, what does the state statute require as minimum opportunities? So that's why I included the 180 days. We offer 181. So technically, you could remove a day of school. But that's not mandatory. And a day of school would save a lot of salary money, actually. You don't pay people for one day. And I'm not even sure you could do that because there's a contract. I'm sure Mary Ellen's like, whoa, wait a minute. So it's not as easy as portrayed even in that other version of the question, unless I'm not seeing something.
I think, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, I think that does make sense, and that's perhaps a slightly different version that is occasionally presented in other parts of the budget conversation, where people talk about a number going up or a number going down or increasing or decreasing, whatever that may be, and it's alluded to the fact that, okay, that's fine, but it can only impact this part of the budget because this is locked in. So it sounds like it's greater than that. All the way down to the, as you said, essentially down to the studs. It's that gray,
Yeah.
so.
So I'm guilty of that message, right? And it's because we have certain structures of programming that we're just not gonna go and dismantle because people think we can go there. Like,
Right.
to program at the budget table is bad business. Like, and we're engaging in part of that these 2 nights, right? So to have the conversation on should we have X program shouldn't be a result of are we wanting to cut that out of a budget or not. It should be based on the merits of should we have that program. And then at the budget table say, remember, we made a commitment to running that program, and now it's time for us to put our money where that priority is. So I think I'm guilty of that message that you're saying, because at that point in our process, there are only certain places to go because we've committed to these structures that offer kids opportunities. Hence, that statement is true. If we want to tinker around the edges, it's going to take a lot of edges to get to that big number as of last spring. So
absolutely, it makes sense. The programs drive the budget. It's a reflection of the commitments and the
Yeah.
programs and the priorities that we've all agreed to throughout both this process and all the ones that you guys have engaged in much longer since I was here, for sure. And that makes sense in that process. I think it's important to remember that both in this room and outside of this room as we move ahead and other people start tinkering around the edges. So, thank you.
I think the nuance is the contractual piece, so, it's contractual to maintain what we have. The bus contract is contractual, we've got a lot of contractual stuff that, we've made a commitment to this, and so with that comes the contractual increases that come along with it that aren't really negotiable. I mean, a contract's a
Yeah.
contract.
I think the contracts fall on that side of the line a little
Yep.
bit more.
Mr. Smith?
And then just real quick, I really appreciate that dialogue, and I think one of the things that it's not a thing for now, because I really appreciate all the work that you guys have put into this, but one of the things maybe after this budget season is done, I think that I would love to go through the thought exercise of what the budget would look like if the Milford Public Schools played the Powerball and won the $1 billion, right? And so I feel like we're doing a really good job of talking about what the right size budget is for our community based on the needs and zero-based budgeting and that stuff. Obviously, we talked about how we don't want to be the bare bones, but if we had the windfall and had a lot of resources and didn't have to be as frugal as we're trying to be now, what are some of those other things that are in addition to the buildings and grounds want list, right? So what are some of the other wants we could have if we had additional resources, just to calibrate, because I do feel like we're trying to talk about what the Goldilocks budget is, but not necessarily, I'm still learning about what are some of the other wants that we're not talking about because we're trying to be frugal and prudent and achieve those goals, so.
I think that's an open-ended, that's a big.
Not for now, but that's just one of those longer term.
It's question 34, there's a list right here, we get to it
Right,
next.
she's got this running list in her head, 5 years out, this is
Yeah.
what, so.
I always, Mr. Smith, have a 5-year plan in my head.
Yeah.
It's just, but with that said, just like in a home budget, I'd like the whole world tour vacation, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna handle different countries of Europe one at a time, right? So while there are big dreams, we also wanna be responsible about that. And systemically, when you think about a system improvement and organizationally, some systems and structures have to be built in order to handle future dreams.
Mhm.
So I think in a planful way, we could talk about those dreams, knowing that we would never propose, a Goldilocks. Goldilocks is just right, and I think this is the just right budget for 24-25.
Mhm.
Should we go to 34?
Yep.
Thank you.
Please share requests that were not included in the final budget request. Would very much like to know some of the programs on the cutting room floor that didn't make the budget. So here's a list. I won't read no, I think I should for the record, thank you. Some of the deferred requests include an additional art teacher, a Mandarin teacher, particularly for the middle school level, a multilingual learner teacher, additional specialized programs such as we are doing at the elementary but for middle and high, and to go with that specialized equipment. In addition to the one firewall, we were going to request 2. Vertical mobile whiteboards to align to an instructional practice that we are implementing in our classrooms. Elementary social studies materials, a kiln at Pumpkin Delight, additional security cameras and replacement cameras, digital equipment for art, equipment for physical education classes, additional music instruments, more pottery wheels, iPads, an additional maintenance truck because of aging, and other various miscellaneous maintenance equipment.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Muller.
On the list here, it's at the top and caught my attention on the art teacher piece. We had talked a little bit briefly the other night, and this is help educate me on the thinking around the holistic picture here as well. We had talked about, if I'm remembering correctly, a special teacher of the 4 specials for each of the target being for each of the elementaries, so, 8 across there, and then different alignments at middle school and high school and all of that. What specifically is this art teacher that didn't make the list?
It was for elementary, and there was an intentional hold on this, because as I alluded last night, part of the dream is to build a school-wide enrichment model for elementary students. And looking at that delivery model for gifted and talented that opens up enrichment for all kids. And we believe that part of the resources that we'll need for that is rolling our specialists up to 1.0 at each school. But responsibly, as an instructional leader, I feel like we need to put resources in when we're ready to program, not put the resource in and then take our time. So I asked our team to hit pause on the additional FTE, spend this next 8 to 9 months, rolling up to next October, to develop the program. So you'll likely see this art teacher in the 25-26 budget.
So this holds us, if I'm mathing correctly in my head as you're talking there, that connected to the enrichment question, which is a little bit separate, this holds us right now at 7 art teachers across the 8 schools.
Well, that's question 37.
There's
a
another
chart.
question on this.
Oh,
coming
okay.
up.
Yeah. So if you want to reference that, the art teachers across the 8 schools is 6.8 FTEs.
Okay,
So they were asking for an additional 1.0.
so we're holding at 6.8 for next year. The additional 1.0 would potentially come after that. And of the, just referencing the breakdown here, where it says like a 1.0, is that a single individual at that school who is there right now? Or is that 1.0 comprised of 0.333 of 3 different folks who are driving around?
I would have to check my spreadsheet. There are some of these numbers, like I think I remember, but I'll look at the spreadsheet before we end.
Mhm.
I think like the music CPM at CAFPEN is at 0.3, 0.4.
Okay, so I know we talk a lot about quality of life and support for our staff and for our teachers and our specialists and all of that, and I know just from watching the number of teachers in some of these specialist roles across some of these departments who are splitting across multiple schools, half a day here, 2 days here, over there for one class, and then another teacher's doing the same thing across the same special, across the same set of schools. It feels inefficient, it feels kind of surprising, and seeing that that was intentionally left out and held at 6.8 was just a question that came to mind.
So I think there's another side of this story that we should consider.
Sure.
So while the health and concern around a teacher going from school to school is not uncommon in our field, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Shared teachers is how we roll. But we also have to look at an equitable opportunity factor that this board has to take seriously. So at CAFPEN, there are fewer sections than, let's say, Orange Avenue. And so you're giving the same staffing level for smaller school, smaller sections than a larger school with larger sections. So now we're creating more resources for smaller schools. And what we could start to hear, which we will, because this happens in our field, that places like Orange Avenue may say, well, why did they get 1.0 and we get 1.0 and we have more kids and we have more sections? And in order, what we don't want to do is give a teacher a full-time allocation at CAFPEN, and they give the required, let's say, music instruction on their schedule, and they have huge holes in their schedule. And so they're not teaching the same amount of minutes. So a way to fix that is to give them additional music classes, right? So now we're gonna give, let's say, CAFPEN second graders more music to fill a schedule because they have 1.0 staffing. But what about the second graders at Orange? Because there's only 1.0, those second graders only get one section of music where CAFPEN is gonna get 2 now. So the story is much bigger than teachers who are traveling and life quality for them, and I'm sensitive to that, but there are many facets to this problem. So in an effort to fix one problem, you may be creating another. But if we consider a school-wide enrichment model, where there are times that we intentionally open up, and we still have to plan it, so don't quote me on future plans, where you intentionally open up some slots of the day where our specialists are being used within their field. We're not asking them to teach outside their certification, but it's an enrichment-focused experience for kids. Then we are filling up schedules, and we're allowing that experience for all kids equitably across the 8 schools, and it's a good for everybody experience. Like, it's a win-win. And we have full-time specialists, and we have kids engaging in extended learning.
Sounds like an excellent conversation for another day.
But it is something to think about when we are making the case to roll up 1.0 FTEs at each school.
Programming driving the budget next time.
Ms. Doyle?
Ms. Capazna, are arts, music, and PE difficult positions to fill?
They can be, yes.
Okay.
I would say out of all those, music more so. PE not so much, or media probably somewhere in the middle.
Okay. So there is a little bit of a component of not necessarily being able to find these people to fill the 1.0s in that sense is kind of what I hear sometimes. Because I think about all our sheets that we have, and it's always like art teacher until filled, as long as like high stress areas and that. And I think, I don't know if that's a component and aspect as well.
But this problem doesn't exist just at elementary, so I feel like there's like this focus on elementary and why aren't we rolling them up, and so I'm thinking of there's shared music staff across the high schools, and we're sharing a music person at the academy and at Foreign. We're sharing strings and orchestra across multiple levels actually. I can't think of off the top of my head a core sharing, but
Could be like a math, in years past, there have been math that needs to travel based upon the number of
Right.
students that need a section.
there's I think in some, we try not to share across levels. Sometimes it's not possible, particularly with strings and orchestra. So I guess if this is a future conversation with the board, I'd like to better understand why. Outside of quality of the impact on adults traveling from school to school. Again, that is part of an educational institution's culture, that we share staff. So I want to better understand, so we can take into consideration those factors in considering rolling up to 1.0 at the elementaries.
I think from my perspective, 2 thoughts. One, the elementary makes a very good, clean base example of this, because unlike strings or orchestra at the high school level, these are all, every kid's taking all this stuff. Every kid at the elementary school is taking, you know how many there are. You know how many are gonna be taking art, you know how many are gonna be taking music, PE, because they all do it. So that makes it an easy, clean, in my mind, example for the discussion. And I think in terms of the concerns, I don't personally have strong concerns with it right now. It's more of a, hey, I'm new, this is interesting, you're right, there are a lot of sides to it beyond just what we may see here on a bullet and here in a budget, and those are all connected to programming and thought and policy and decisions that have gone into this budget. So now, from a learning perspective, working backwards and just understanding what that process is, so that when we get to it at some point and have to make a decision on it, we understand the thinking that went into it.
And at the end of the day, if we make CPM 1.0 music, for example, we have to talk about what does that teacher do for an additional 1.5 days at CAF Penn. If all students can receive music within a 0.7, they have their regular access to music education, just like everybody else in the district. So a 0.3 equals 1.5 days. How do you fill a teacher's 1.5 days of a schedule? That is a budget efficiency or inefficiency, depending how you look at it. So, but thanks for the conversation.
Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Preet?
Just going back to 34 with some of the deferred requests, when I see things like the kiln at PDS and a pottery wheel, my brain goes to engaging a Milford Education Foundation. Tracy, I know I used to be on the board, as you know, and just whether there can be some creative ways through like a Hobby Lobby, whether they can be engaged to help with the cost of some of that, since it's a nonprofit, it can be worked through so that Milford Education Foundation can work it through to give it to the school system, but work with Hobby Lobby in that case, for instance. Equipment for physical education, I think they've worked with the Edge before, or Planet Fitness. And then musical instruments, have we thought of like refurbished instruments, or I'm just thinking creatively in ways to kind of, just try to fulfill these, but not have it be a part of the regular budget. Musical instruments, like, is there a big company also, that we can engage, or have Milford Education Foundation engage to kind of get $5,000 or whatever these dollar amounts might be, just thinking creatively down the road.
So the music instruments will be a every year item. We are on a regular replacement cycle. They're very expensive. Some years we can afford, like we did a whole drum line for Foreign a couple of years ago, very costly, but it was time. So, and I don't know how I feel holistically about going to a foundation to help fund our basic needs. I think MEF, and I could be wrong, is interested in, above and beyond and extension kind of opportunities. But I feel like it's the school district's responsibility to provide musical instruments to our musicians. I think if we get, in a really bad place where we're not able to buy instruments for multiple years, then maybe, but I think our board's been good about, so this is just, like Mr. Smith, our supervisor for the arts comes with like everything she wants, as she should. And we always have to say, okay, well, no, yes to these and no to these. So that's what ended up on the cutting room floor.
Do these sometimes come down to equity amongst schools? So the Kiln at Pumpkin kind of, I'm an artist, so would love to see more of that, but the Kiln at an elementary school kind of surprised me.
Well, we held off because it's a renovation.
Correct, yes, but.
So we're waiting for the project
But
to
do
get
all the
done.
other schools have kilns?
I think they do, right?
In the elementary school?
No?
So,
Well, we could take
I don't know,
inventory of
it
that.
kind of just surprised me, that's all, but, no, I don't need any further explanation of that, so. But yes, that does make sense, that.
It also could be a possibility of engaging the business community as well, and trying to partnership, I know we try to do that as well. And just engage if, for all we know, the music store in Devon wants to, help out above and beyond, and maybe they do as far as, donating a certain amount. But, just to kind of, think creatively and get the business community involved, and, there are opportunities maybe that's out there, but I totally understand where you're coming from. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
it's a need, right? It's
Well,
not
and
a
you can assume that we have business partnerships. Yep.
And it's costly, the music equipment is very expensive, so. Thank you. Other questions? Okay, we can move on.
All right, I have the next one. Cybersecurity. What type of additional firewall are we adding? But while our firewall is up to date, it is nearly at its end of life, therefore needing replacement. The new firewall provides newer features such as improving capacity to handle external taps coming inward and increasing protection and detection. With concerns about exposing too much information about the firewall and hence the potential vulnerabilities, we cannot publicly go into specifics about the firewall. Cybersecurity will also be highlighted as part of the Safety and Security Report in February.
Questions? Okay, next one.
Number 36, the number of students that the Bridges clinicians are seeing at the Academy, West Shore, and Law. At this time, approximately 20 referrals have been made at each Law and West Shore. The clinician comes to the Academy once a week for 3 to 4 hours. The number of students seen by the clinician at the Academy fluctuates. Currently, 5 students are being serviced by the clinician. Referrals for services are ongoing.
Questions on that one? Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. Just as a reminder, it was just last week that they started there, right? So it's already a large uptake. And then the Academy has approximately 100 students? No.
40.
They have 40, so 5 out of 40 are being, receiving services. It's great to hear that it's great that we have the ability for 20 students in each school to see it, not great that 20 students need it 4 days after school started in the second semester. So I think it points to the need of continuing these relationships.
Any questions on that?
37, what is the current level of staffing for elementary specials, art, music, physical education, media? And what will be the budgetary impact of having one of each FTE in each elementary school? So I won't read all the specific numbers, but in music, there are 7 across the 8 schools. In art, there's a 6.8 FTE across the 8 schools. Media, 7.8 across the 8 schools, and in physical education, 8.0. Budgetary impact of having one of each specialist full-time in each school would be a 2.4 FTE or approximately $156,000.
Questions on this? Okay, thank you. Number 38?
Ms. Brennan, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, just real
Sorry, I
quick.
didn't see.
Similar to the nuclear family being like 2.3 kids, which obviously you can't have a fraction of a kid. I understand the whole having an FTE, but can you just explain some more about like what the 6.8 means relative to humans? Because I really appreciate the dialogue we just had about why the numbers are where they are, but what that translates to is like these
So
fractions.
1.0, Wendy, Ms. Kapazza, please jump in, but 1.0 is someone that would work at, is full-time,
Mhm.
and in particular assigned, in this example,
Mhm.
to a school for 5 days a week. We could break down a day by a 0.2. So 5.2s equal 1.0.
Mhm.
So if a school is allocated a 0.8 of an FTE for a
Mhm.
particular subject, that means that they could have them for 4 days. Now, sometimes it doesn't equal just 4 days. It could be across 5, but the hours they work are an equivalent of 4 days' worth of work for a teacher's contract.
Mhm.
Is that?
Yes, that's accurate.
Could it
And
be more
just
than one
because-
person that fills in the 0.8?
Yes, it
Yeah.
could be more than one person. Also, any person on here, such as Pumpkin Delight Media, 0.8, that individual who's 0.8 there is also 0.2 over at the academy. So it doesn't mean that these people are all part-time either.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's say the 0.8 could be 4 people each going in one day.
It could be, we obviously try not to do that, yeah.
Right.
We try to keep it as large as possible in each school. In, say, strings, that's not possible, but in these areas it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Since recruiting in these specialist areas is very difficult, I can imagine retention is also a very important part of it as well.
So there is no example of more than 2 people at a school for one subject. So the JFK art is a 0.2, 0.7 split. So there are only 2 people teaching art. And in the chart in front of me, with a quick scan, I don't have any subject at a particular school, just want to be accurate here, with more than 2 people assigned.
And
Right.
just a quick follow-up, so for art, with 6.8, and apologies for not doing the arithmetic, I guess is quick, but does that mean there are 6 art employees, or 7 and then they drop down to 0.2, or I guess how do?
Art,
So I think like Ms.
Yeah.
2, please jump in.
Yeah, so like Ms. Capazza said, that one, where is the, so some of these teachers here could be at possibly a different level, right? So
Okay.
when we look at this is a snapshot
Gotcha.
of elementary, because the question was based on the elementary staffing.
Thank you.
So when you take a step back, there's a larger picture that these other point, whatever they may be, make up other full-time staff.
Thank you.
And to
Someone
your
that
point,
spends-
there was a time, and some of you who have been around for a while, where schools would have 5 different art teachers coming in, 1 per day. And we've done, over the years, a really good job of preventing that, because that wasn't just very efficient, very effective. But there was a day when that happened.
Staffing is really complicated. It's a very complicated.
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for explaining that.
That doesn't
Yep.
I think Mr. Kova could probably.
Yeah.
His engineering mind.
So I'll give, in music, there's only one school that has a split FTE. Everybody else only has one person going to their school. So maybe the problem isn't as big as is being perceived right now. In orchestra and band, I'm not even counting, because there's just no way.
Yeah.
In art, there are only 2 schools that split an FTE. And in media, we'll count PDS, but in order to provide the academy specialists, there's no way you can do a 1.0 media there, a 1.0 art. So you have to scoop part of an FTE somewhere, because you're not going to hire a 0.2 art teacher all on their own. So that's why we scoop up the 0.2 from Pumpkin, and they provide service at Academy. So in music, there's a 1 school. In art, there are 2 schools, based on the chart that has been given me. And then in library and media, technically Pumpkin is at Pumpkin and the Academy. So.
Any other questions on this? Okay, thank you.
All right, I have the next one. What is kindergarten enrollment for 24-25? To date, we have confirmed 192 kindergarten students who will be attending Milford Public Schools in the fall.
I think it's important to say that number is anticipated to change over the course of the next,
It's very low.
right?
But
this
parents
is
are
early.
Yeah, it's early, so that was my next sentence. Parents didn't anticipate our registration being so early, but we, with good intention, did that. So parents that wanted to apply for a waiver and could possibly get a no answer would have more time to plan. We plan on having another registration opening at the end of January.
End of this month, yep.
So we'll see if we can scoop up more parents. Parents are much more aware of kindergarten registration like at this time of year. So there's a lot of conversation to have about kindergarten numbers though in the future.
My recollection is that very often, I don't know if it happens so much with kindergarten as other grades, but summertime as well, there's often an influx of registration at the last minute even that
Right.
were unanticipated. Is that still?
There's like an August awakening, like, oh,
Oh,
schools. I think school's next month. We should look into that. No disrespect, it just does happen.
Yeah. I'm very, very personally aware of that, yes.
Mr. Smith?
Just real quick, if you'll indulge me, I appreciate Dr. Kataya expanding on some of the unique challenges that she did this morning at the CABE Legislative Breakfast about what kindergarten is facing this year with the different kind of the changing in the enrollment date and what the challenges we're uniquely facing this year, especially for folks at home who might not have had the opportunity to be so informed. But just love to have you do the quick explanation of how challenging and how important this number is this year rather than some previous years.
So thanks for being at the legislative breakfast, and it's not the first time we've spoken to legislators about the challenge. So I will go on record that I believe that the date needed to be changed. We needed to move away from December 1st to September 1st. We were one of the last states in the nation to make that change. With that said, what wasn't anticipated was the opportunity to apply for a waiver. And that has complicated things very much. And if you think about it, we had a policy that any child that was born after December 31st and before January 31st, they could apply for an assessment. In my time, I think we assessed 1 child in the 6 years I've been here. So even at that, with the old date, there was only 1 month of a swing opportunity. So with this legislation, there are 4 months of opportunity for flexibility. And honestly, this is hard to have a conversation with parents on this, actually, particularly parents who are expecting to send their kids to kindergarten next year. And I think the legislation is grossly unfair to families. Because in July, we've just announced, oh, by the way, in a year, you may not be able to send your child to school, even though you've been planning for 5 years, that your family budget could be significantly changing in a year, right? So financially, I think it was grossly unfair to our families that it's just sprung. What would have been nice is a phase-in, and there have been phase-ins in the past legislatively. So it could have been next year, it's November 31st, and the following year, October 31st, and then finally roll in, like, and give families time to plan, knowing that they may have an extra year of daycare or preschool to pay for. So that's one big thing. The second is now we have just created, in a state that has one of the largest achievement gaps, in my opinion, an even greater inequity and opportunity for achievement gap to grow. Because we've just released this group of preschoolers, or kids that would have qualified for kindergarten at one time, to not able to access an educational opportunity because there is no universal preschool. And so some of these children may need to stay home, which stay-at-home moms with kids, that's your intention, it's good, but I'm talking about the parents who can't afford otherwise, that also may be juggling daycare and preschool among family members or neighbors. So access to a public, formal public education also is a big disadvantage here. And I'm gonna guess there's some of that here in the city of Milford. We're having to start to say no to some families through an assessment that, yet again, is undefined. So 169 municipalities get to select their own assessment. And if one community decides to be very loose about that assessment, they'll take more kids in, even though they may not be 5 until November, December. And in some communities where they're gonna be strict and more by the books, then they'll have fewer kids coming and accessing kindergarten. So there are some guidelines the state gave us. We've decided to go the route of a more of a social emotional readiness based on some state standards. We're not expecting kids to be academically ready. So when the word readiness was introduced as part of this legislation, I think it threw us back philosophically in our modernized version perspective of what it means to go to kindergarten. We never tell parents, in order to get ready for kindergarten, you need to work with your child on ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, phonics, algebra, expressions. And we don't do we say the only thing you have to do is be 5, and we'll take care of the rest. But the word readiness introduces into the world of education that there is a certain thing your child needs to be able to do in order to get into kindergarten. And developmentally, I'm just strongly against that notion that we have to get kids ready for kindergarten. So there are a lot of problems, I think, with the waiver. I'm hoping that legislators consider removing the waiver from the language. It was our understanding that we were all in favor of the September 1st, but there was a last-minute addition. You know how that happens. And the waiver language jumped in, and that has created a mess.
Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
I'm trying to figure out how to frame this. Is there any, I know years ago, we used to have transition classes, and that was moved away from, as part of that, students who were in that aspect.
Next question, please.
Yeah. So the other half of that is that, is there a noticeable shift of male and female students because of how they progress? Is that the class that's entering going to be more female dominated versus male dominated, or a split in that sense? Is there effects in that level in terms of social emotional learning?
As far as the kindergarten level?
Yeah.
I don't know that I can place a gender-oriented factor on that. I would hesitate to do that, because that feels a little stereotypical.
Conversation here.
Right, my whole point is what is the impact in the future? Because if half the boys if there are anecdotal things that are discussed of, all my friends are like, my girls are ready to go at 4 in September, but the boys are a little behind. So is there more, half the boys can't go, then it makes the class bigger, but we can move on from this. We don't need to continue anymore.
Well, those are some hypotheticals.
Yeah.
But I'm also gonna jump in and make a modification, because I'm glad that a lot of our staff are watching the meeting right now and texting me with this, there's more information. So, latest and breaking news. So a modification to shared staff. So thanks whoever's watching. There is another school that shares, oh, and look, it just magically changed on the Google spreadsheet. There's another school that has the sharing. So Orchard Hills does a sharing of art teachers between 3 teachers. That's the only example on the spreadsheet with 3. With a plan to fix it for next year. She has a plan for next year, and that will not be the case 2 max like discussed at the meeting. So she's watching. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Smith.
So one quick follow-up, I don't know if you need to expand upon it, but I found it interesting this morning talking about when you decrease the window of the students can enroll next year, the impact is you have, 33% more students the following year, so there might be the bump in, the bubble of the student population.
There are two impacts to that.
Yeah.
A drop in enrollment 1 year, increase the following, which will then be seen throughout the system. So
Right.
think about the long-term 12-year impact of that, and what that will do to like 6th grade teaming and electives. I think you heard the Amity High School Amity Regional School District, thank you, superintendent speak that she's worried when she gets kids, it'll be so low that it'll decimate electives. That could happen here too.
Right.
The other side of that is staffing.
Yeah.
You talk about retention, like great kindergarten staff, we've got great team, and if we find a 30% reduction of kindergarten enrollment, that could be 5-6 teachers. And that's a hard loss, and then we're gonna have to, and budgetarily, think about that, okay? We take a nosedive, which yay, we just saved 6 FTEs, but I come out of the gate the following year asking for 6 FTEs.
At least.
Yeah. So that's not good for anything.
Right.
So there are some systems, I don't know if you were there when Cheshire spoke, I'm not suggesting we do this, I'm just saying, that they are creating an optional preschool for 1 year only at a nominal fee for families of students who did not qualify for kindergarten. And he only has X amount of slots, and the requests are already exceeded that. So, like, do you go temporarily for 1 year into the preschool business? And that's not easy, because now you gotta change your, well, maybe not. If you move a kindergarten to a preschool, the furniture and everything will be the same, but there are just considerations on that. So that could potentially be a dialogue for us, you know? So when we get more secure numbers, we may be faced with, so here's kindergarten, we don't need those FTEs, but what do you, and I think the response is also to the community of Milford, like, what do we do with these 4-year-olds, right? Not that that would be our legal responsibility.
But, and also maybe the FTEs, right? If you're anticipating that the following year you have a bump, I feel like there's some duty for us at least to have the conversation if there are ways that we can maintain teachers that have been in the system rather than having to lay them off furlough and figure ways to maintain, so that we're not chasing replacing them or finding them in the following year. So.
Right. And I think, Ms. Capazza, the state gave us kindergarten teachers can teach in preschool for 1 year. Did they pass that, or that's just being discussed?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not sure.
So we'd also have to look at certification.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ready to move on?
I know I looked it up.
What number are we on?
I believe
39.
Toilet paper.
What does it cost to buy toilet paper, paper towels, and soap? And in the chart below, I itemize those different items for you,
Got
the
Kleenex.
anticipated cost.
Thank you.
Any questions on this? Yep, okay. All right, so, were
And
there
we'll
any?
discuss question 40 on Wednesday night.
Correct, right, yep. Were there any questions that we missed that anyone had submitted? I just want to make sure. Okay, so, we'll come back on Wednesday for this final piece.
Do you anticipate that we'll get more questions? Maybe?
Hard to say.
No promises.
Look at Laura, she's ready to go.
Well,
Check my notes.
we do, you know, we've seen that we would be ready to vote on Wednesday. You know, we have a hold on Thursday, but it would seem to me that we would be ready to vote on Wednesday. So, we'll have this final piece.
We're happy to
and
take more
see.
questions. I just ask that if there are any like research-based questions that you.
And please try to keep them budget related. And remember that Monday's a school holiday, so there's.
Offices are officially
Correct,
closed,
yeah,
but
so staff is off on
we're around.
All right, so we will see everybody at 7 PM on Wednesday, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. Do we have anybody who would like to make public comment this evening? Thank you for being here, and I will dispense with the public comment statement. Motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
your second?
Second.
Mr. Fermenter seconds. Anybody opposed to adjournment? Seeing none, we'll adjourn at 8:24. Thank you.